Imagine discovering that the last 7 years of your life were built on a lie, that the person you loved most in the world didn't abandon you, as you always believed, but was prevented from reaching you through cruel and calculated manipulation. James Anderson thought he knew his story, a young architect who chose his international career over love, leaving behind in Charleston the woman who promised to wait for him. Sophia Williams also thought she knew hers, a woman who was abandoned by the love of her life and had to rebuild her happiness with another man. But sometimes, the stories we live aren't the real stories. Sometimes, there are people behind the scenes orchestrating our suffering, unilaterally deciding they know what's best for our lives. When James returned to Charleston after 7 years, he expected to find only memories and perhaps a sense of closure. What he didn't expect was to discover signs that Sophia had never really moved on. Fresh flowers on the pier where they used to watch the sunset, a table still reserved at the café where they had Sunday brunch, a secret blog documenting years of waiting and longing. These small clues led him on a journey of discovery that would reveal a conspiracy of manipulation far beyond anything he could have imagined. A web of lies woven by someone who should have protected, not destroyed. A systematic sabotage that cost 7 years of happiness to two people who truly loved each other. But the truth, when it finally comes to light, doesn't always bring relief. Sometimes it brings even greater complications. Because Sophia was no longer waiting alone. She had built a new life, found new love, was about to marry another man. A good, decent man who genuinely loved her and deserved honesty. James found himself facing a devastating moral dilemma. Fight for the love that had been sabotaged or respect the new happiness she had built? And Sophia, how to choose between the security of the present and the passion of the past, between gratitude and true love, between what's right and what the heart desires. This is a story about the consequences of lies, about the price of control disguised as protection, about the courage needed to confront painful truths. It's about discovering that sometimes the people we love most are capable of the deepest betrayals, and that true love sometimes requires us to face not only our own fears, but also the manipulations of those who believe they know what's best for our lives. But above all, it's a story about the transformative power of truth and how genuine love can survive any storm, as long as there's enough courage to fight for it. You know that feeling when you come home after a long time and everything seems different, but at the same time exactly the same. That's what James Anderson felt when he stepped onto the cobblestone streets of Charleston again. 7 years is a long time, my friend. Long enough for a person to completely change, build a new life, forget old promises. But there's something about this historic city that seems to guard memories like buried treasures, waiting for the right moment to be discovered. James walked along the same tree-lined avenues where he used to stroll hand in hand with Sophia Williams, his ex-fiancée, and every corner brought back a piece of what they had lived together. His heart beat strangely, as if it recognized every detail of this place he once called home. It was as if Charleston had stood still in time waiting for his return. But had Sophia waited too? This question hammered in his head like an echo that refuses to be silenced. True love has that effect. Even after years, it can still move us in ways we can't explain. James knew he had made the right decision accepting those international architecture projects, but now, walking these familiar streets, he began to question whether professional success was worth it when the price was leaving behind the person he loved most. There's something interesting about small southern towns. They have a unique way of preserving stories. Every building, every cafe, every park bench seems to have its own memory. James couldn't help but smile when he passed the old movie theater where they watched their first film together, or when he saw the bookstore where Sophia used to spend hours choosing classic novels. But it was when he reached the French Quarter that things got really interesting. You know that déjà vu feeling? Well, that's exactly what he felt when he saw the little cafe where they used to have Sunday brunch. The place looked exactly the same wrought iron tables, the same hanging plants on the porch. Even the menu seemed unchanged. James hesitated for a moment before entering, as if he were about to open an emotional Pandora's box. The door chime rang with the same melodious sound as always, and then something happened that made his heart almost stop. The waitress, a kind lady with graying hair, looked at him with a smile of recognition and said, "Oh, you must be James. Your table is always reserved, just like Miss Sophia requested." The world seemed to spin slower in that moment. How was the table still reserved after 7 years? This made no sense at all unless James's heart began beating so hard he was sure the waitress could hear it. Had Sophia really kept that reservation all these years? Or was it just a coincidence, a misunderstanding by the employee? He tried to maintain his composure, but inside, he was a hurricane of emotions. The longing he had tried to bury during all those years abroad came back with overwhelming force. James remembered how they always used to sit at the same table, next to the window, where they could watch the street activity while planning their future together. They had so many dreams, so many plans. Sophia always said she wanted a big family full of love and laughter. And him? He wanted to build beautiful houses where happy families could create their own stories. What irony of fate. He had spent 7 years building houses for other people while leaving his own love story unfinished. The waitress kept smiling, waiting for an answer, but James was lost in his own thoughts. How could he explain that he was no longer the same man who had left? How could he say that maybe he no longer had the right to occupy that table? But something inside him, a voice that sounded suspiciously like Sophia's, whispered that maybe there was still hope. Maybe true love really was capable of resisting time and distance. After accepting to sit at their table, because let's face it, it would be impossible to refuse after that revelation, James decided to explore more of the city. Each step was a mixture of nostalgia and discovery, as if he were revisiting a favorite book and finding details he had missed in the first reading. Charleston had a special way of telling stories through its streets, and his and Sophia's story was written on every corner. He passed by the square where they had their first picnic, by the bridge where he asked her to be his girlfriend, by the church where they dreamed of getting married. But it was when he reached the old pier that things became even more intriguing. You know that special place every couple has? That little corner that's just theirs, where they watched the sunset and made eternal promises? Well, that's exactly what that pier represented for them. James approached slowly as if walking on sacred ground, and then he saw something that turned his world upside down. A bouquet of fresh daisies tied with a blue ribbon, exactly like Sophia used to do, was resting on the railing in the exact spot where they used to stand. The flowers were fresh, as if they had been placed there recently. Coincidence? James no longer believed in coincidences, not when it came to Sophia Williams. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink that James had seen on postcards during his years abroad, but which never managed to reproduce the magic of that specific moment in Charleston. He picked up the bouquet with trembling hands, looking for some note, some sign of who had left those flowers there. There was nothing written, but it wasn't necessary. James knew that gesture better than anyone. Sophia always said that daisies were the flowers of forgiveness and new beginnings. Did she know he would return? Had she somehow sensed his presence in the city? These questions danced in his head like leaves in the wind. He leaned on the railing in the same place where they used to stand embraced, watching the boats return from the sea. The longing was almost physical, as if someone had opened a hole in his chest. James closed his eyes and could almost smell her perfume, hear her melodious laugh, feel the warmth of her hand in his. For a moment, it was as if the 7 years had never existed, as if they were just two young people in love dreaming about the future. But when he opened his eyes, reality returned. He was alone, holding a bouquet of flowers that might not even be for him. Maybe Sophia had moved on, built a new life, found a new love. Maybe those flowers were from someone else, for someone else. But his heart refused to accept that possibility. Night was falling over Charleston, and James knew he needed to make a decision. He could go back to the hotel, pack his bags and leave again, pretending none of this had happened. Or he could stay, investigate these mysterious signs, discover if Sophia had really kept a place for him in her life all these years. His family always said he was too stubborn, that when he set his mind on something, there was no force in the world that could make him give up. Maybe it was time to use that stubbornness to his advantage. James tucked one of the daisies in his shirt pocket, close to his heart, and decided he wouldn't leave Charleston without answers. He had spent 7 years building structures in distant countries, but now it was time to rebuild something much more important, the bridge that connected his heart to hers. True love, he had learned during these years of solitude, isn't something that simply disappears with time. It can fall asleep, can be buried under layers of hurt and misunderstandings, but it never dies completely. And if there was a chance, however small, that Sophia still kept a little piece of that love they had shared, James was willing to fight for it. After all, some stories deserve a different ending, don't they? And their story, he was certain, hadn't reached its end yet. In fact, maybe it was just beginning a new chapter. The walk back to the hotel was different from the way there. James was no longer just revisiting memories. Now he was collecting clues, like a detective of the heart trying to solve a mystery of love. Every detail gained new meaning. The way the cafe waitress had talked about the reserved table, the fresh flowers on the pier, even the way some people on the street seemed to recognize him with a nostalgic smile. Charleston had always been a small town, where everyone knows everyone, and James was beginning to realize that maybe his departure hadn't gone unnoticed. Maybe people knew something he didn't know yet. Maybe Sophia had left more clues than just flowers and table reservations. The thought made him anxious and hopeful at the same time, a dangerous combination for someone trying to protect his heart from new disappointment. But you know how it is, right? When true love is involved, we do things that reason would never approve of. James knew he was walking an emotional tightrope, but he couldn't stop. Curiosity, mixed with deep longing and stubborn hope, pushed him forward. He needed to know the truth, even if that truth could break his heart into into 1,000 pieces again. Because sometimes, my friend, it's better to have your heart broken by the truth than to live a lifetime with doubt hammering in your head. That night, lying in the hotel bed, James couldn't sleep a wink. The daisy he had kept in his pocket was now on the nightstand, like a silent reminder that some things in life are worth investigating. He kept thinking about all the what-ifs that had populated his mind during these 7 years. What if he hadn't left? What if he had fought harder for the relationship? What if Sophia had really waited for him all these years? These questions were like ghosts that refused to rest in peace. James picked up his phone and, on impulse, typed her name into Google. He didn't know exactly what he expected to find, but he needed more clues, more signs that he wasn't imagining things. The internet, this wonderful and haunting tool at the same time, could hold secrets he never imagined. Maybe there were photos, news, some clue about the life Sophia had built after he left. His heart beat fast while the search results loaded on the screen. He was about to discover if the woman he still loved had moved on, or if, like him, she had kept a piece of the past alive in her heart. Sometimes, the answers we fear most are exactly the ones we need to hear most. And James was about to discover that the truth about Sophia Williams was much more complex and surprising than he could ever have imagined. Have you ever had one of those mornings where you wake up with a strange feeling, like the universe is plotting something special for you? That's exactly how James woke up on his second day in Charleston. The daisy on the nightstand seemed to glow with the morning sunlight, as if it were whispering secrets he still couldn't decipher. After a restless night, full of confusing dreams where Sophia appeared and disappeared like a mirage, James decided it was time to be braver in his investigation. He remembered that Sophia had always had a passion for art, especially painting, and that she worked at a small gallery in the historic downtown area. Was she still there? Did the gallery still exist? His heart raced just thinking about the possibility of seeing her again, even if only from afar. James knew he was playing with fire. After all, 7 years is a long time, and people change, build new lives, find new loves. But something inside him, a stubborn voice that sounded a lot like intuition, insisted that he needed to go there, not necessarily to find her, but to better understand the signs Charleston was sending him. Sometimes, my friend, life gives us subtle clues, and it's up to us to decide whether we'll follow them or ignore them. James had spent 7 years ignoring the whispers of his heart, and now he was determined to listen to every word fate had to tell him. The walk to the gallery was a mixture of anxiety and nostalgia. James passed the same streets he had walked the day before, but now everything seemed different, charged with an almost palpable expectation. The Magnolia Gallery had always been one of Sophia's favorite places, a cozy space where local artists displayed their works and where she could spend hours talking about colors, textures, and emotions translated into paint on canvas. James remembered how her eyes would light up when she talked about a painting that touched her deeply, as if each work were a window into the artist's soul. When he arrived in front of the red brick building with its white-framed windows, James felt a wave of relief seeing that the gallery was still operating. The discreet sign on the door remained the same, and through the storefront, he could see some paintings on display. For a moment, he hesitated. What if Sophia was inside? What if she wasn't? Which of the two possibilities scared him more? James took a deep breath, straightened his shirt, and pushed the glass door. The familiar bell rang, announcing his entrance, and he was immediately enveloped by the characteristic smell of paint, varnish, and old wood that had always defined that place. It was like going back in time, as if the 7 years had never existed, but Sophia wasn't there. In her place, a young woman with curly hair and a welcoming smile approached to greet him. "Can I help you with something?" asked the young woman, and James noticed she had a soft southern accent, typical of the region. He explained that he was visiting the city after a long time and wanted to know about Sophia Williams, who used to work there. The girl's face immediately lit up. "Oh, you must be James," she said, as if it were obvious. "Sophia always talked about you. She doesn't work here anymore, but she still keeps in touch with us, actually." The young woman hesitated for a moment, as if deciding whether or not to tell him something. "She has an art blog that documents all her work. It's quite interesting, full of paintings and personal writings. If you want, I can give you the website address." James felt his heart race. A blog? Sophia had always been reserved, never liked much exposure. Why would she have created a blog? And why did the gallery employee seem so eager to share this information with him? There was something between the lines of that conversation that he couldn't completely decipher. "That would be great," James replied, trying to keep his voice steady despite the emotional storm forming inside him. The young woman wrote down the blog address on a piece of paper and handed it to him with a smile that seemed to hold secrets. "I'm sure you'll find it very interesting," she said, with a special gleam in her eyes. James thanked her and left the gallery with the paper in his hand. hands, feeling like he had just received the key to a mystery that was just beginning to unfold. The walk back to the hotel never seemed so long. James looked at that piece of paper as if it were a treasure map, both anxious and apprehensive to discover what awaited him. Sophia's art blog. This opened so many possibilities, so many questions. What had she written during all these years? What kind of art had she created? And more importantly, was there any mention of him in those digital pages? James knew he was about to invade an intimate space, almost like reading someone's diary without permission. But curiosity and longing were stronger than any ethical consideration. He needed to understand what had happened to Sophia after he left, needed to know if she had kept any memory of the love they had shared. When he finally reached the hotel room, James turned on his laptop with trembling hands and typed in the blog address. The page loaded slowly, as if the universe itself were creating suspense. And then, there it was, Colors of the Heart, Sophia Williams' art blog. The profile picture showed a more mature Sophia, with the same sweet smile he remembered, but with something different in her eyes, a depth that wasn't there before, as if she had lived a lot and learned even more. James clicked on the first post, not knowing he was about to discover a truth that would change everything he thought about the last 7 years. Sometimes, my friend, life reserves surprises for us that are both wonderful and devastating, and James was about to live one of those experiences. The first blog post was dated just 3 months after his departure from Charleston. The title was simple, but loaded with meaning: When Love Becomes Longing. James read every word with his heart in his throat, discovering that Sophia had transformed her pain into art, her tears into brushstrokes, her waiting into poetry. The post talked about a painting she had done, an empty pier at sunset, with a solitary silhouette looking toward the horizon. You didn't need to be a genius to understand that silhouette was her, waiting for someone who might never return. Today I painted our goodbye, she wrote. Not the goodbye we lived, full of promises and hopes, but the real goodbye, the one that happens in the heart when we realize that the person we love chose a different path from ours. James felt a stab in his chest. Chose a different path? But he had left precisely to build a better future for both of them. How could she think he had chosen his career over love? As he continued reading, James realized there was much more to this story than he had imagined. Sophia wrote about letters that never arrived, phone calls that never happened, promises that seemed to have been forgotten. But the most surprising thing was the tone of the texts. There was no anger or resentment, just a deep longing and a stubborn hope that refused to die. It was as if she were documenting a weight, keeping alive the flame of a love that should have been extinguished, but insisted on burning. As James navigated through the blog, he discovered that Sophia had documented not only her feelings, but also her life during all those years. There were posts about exhibitions she visited, books she read, trips she took, always alone, always with a subtle melancholy that permeated every word. But what caught his attention most were the constant references to international architectural projects. Sophia knew where he was working, what buildings he had designed, what awards he had won. How did she have access to this information? James had never posted anything on social media, had always been discreet about his professional life. It was then that he found a post that left him speechless. Pride and longing. In it, Sophia shared a newspaper clipping about a project James had developed in Barcelona, along with a painting she had made based on the building's photo. Even far away, even in silence, I continue rooting for your dreams, she wrote. Maybe true love is this, wishing happiness for the person you love, even when that happiness doesn't include us. James had to stop reading for a moment. Tears blurred his vision, and he needed to process what he was discovering. Sophia had not only waited for him, she had followed his career from afar, cheered for his success, kept alive the pride and love she felt for him. How did she get this information? And more importantly, why had he never known any of this? There was something very wrong with this story, and James was determined to find out what. The most recent blog post was from just a week ago, and the title made James's heart almost stop. Signs of Destiny. Sophia wrote about a strange feeling she had been having lately, as if something important was about to happen. Sometimes I have the impression that he's close, the text said. I can't explain it, but it's as if my heart recognizes his presence even before my eyes do. Is it possible to feel your soulmate even at a distance? Does true love create a connection that transcends space and time? James read and reread those words, trying to understand how this was possible. Had Sophia sensed his arrival? Was that why the flowers were fresh on the pier? Was that why the table remained reserved at the café? The more he read, the more he realized he wasn't dealing with just coincidences or nostalgia. There was something much deeper happening there, a connection that had resisted 7 years of separation and silence. James continued exploring the blog, discovering layers upon layers of a story he thought he knew, but which was actually much more complex than he had imagined. Each post revealed a piece of the puzzle, and he began to realize that maybe he hadn't been the only one to suffer during all these years. Maybe Sophia had her own questions, her her own doubts, her own ghosts to face, and maybe, just maybe, they had been victims of something much bigger than simple misunderstandings or professional choices, something James still couldn't name, but was determined to discover. When James finally closed the laptop, it was already dawn. He had read practically Sophia's entire blog, diving deep into an emotional journey that left him exhausted and energized at the same time. Now he knew she had waited, that she had kept alive the love she felt for him, that she had followed his life from afar with a dedication that bordered on the impossible. But he also knew there were gaps in this story, points that didn't make sense. Why had his letters never reached her? Why had the phone calls never happened? James clearly remembered trying to contact her several times during the first year, but never managed to speak with Sophia. At the time, he interpreted this as a sign that she had decided to move on, that she didn't want to know about him anymore. But now, after reading the blog, he realized there might be another explanation. Maybe someone had interfered with the communication between them. Maybe there were people who didn't want them to be together. Sophia's family had always been complicated, especially her mother, who had never completely approved of the relationship. Had Patricia Williams done something to separate them? The possibility made James's blood boil. If it were true, if someone had really sabotaged their relationship, it changed everything. It meant that the last 7 years of suffering and longing could have been avoided. It meant they had been victims of cruel manipulation, and it meant that maybe there was still time to fix things, to recover what had been lost. James fell asleep with this possibility hammering in his head, knowing that the next day he would have to make an important decision, confront the past and discover the truth, even if that truth could be more painful than uncertainty. You know that feeling when you start pulling a loose thread on a piece of clothing and realize the whole thing might unravel? That's exactly the sensation James had when he woke up the next morning. Sophia's blog had planted a seed of suspicion in his mind, and now that seed was germinating rapidly, creating deep roots of indignation and determination. He couldn't stop thinking about the inconsistencies in the story he had lived. How was it possible that Sophia knew such specific details about his international career, but at the same time wrote about letters that never arrived and phone calls that never happened? James clearly remembered trying to contact her during the first months after his departure. He had sent emails, left messages on her home phone, even tried to speak with mutual friends, but all attempts seemed to fall into a void, as if Sophia had simply vanished off the map. At the time, he interpreted this as a clear message. She had decided to move on and didn't want to hear from him anymore. But now, with the blog revelations, James was beginning to realize there might be a much more sinister explanation for that silence. Maybe someone had deliberately sabotaged the communication between them, and if that were the case, James was determined to find out who had done it and why. After all, 7 years of unnecessary suffering is too long to let slide. Some injustices need to be confronted even if it's too late to change the past. James's first stop that morning was the Charleston Public Library. It might seem strange, but libraries are incredible places for anyone wanting to investigate the past. They hold not just books, but also old newspapers, public records, and most importantly, people who know the city's history like the back of their hand. James knew that if he wanted to understand what had really happened during his absence, he would need more information about the Williams family, especially about Patricia, Sophia's mother. He remembered her as an elegant but controlling woman who always made it clear that she considered James unsuitable for her daughter. Patricia came from an old Charleston family with old money and social connections she valued above all else. James, on the other hand, was a carpenter's son who had earned everything in life through hard work and determination. For Patricia, that wasn't enough. She wanted Sophia to marry someone from society, someone who could maintain the family's status. James had always known this, but at the time he thought their love would be strong enough to overcome any obstacle. Now he was beginning to suspect that maybe Patricia had gone far beyond simple disapproval. Maybe she had taken active measures to separate the couple. The librarian, a lady with white hair and reading glasses, was very helpful when James explained he was researching traditional families in the city. "Ah, the Williams," she said with a knowing smile. "Very influential family around here. The matriarch, Patricia, has always been very, let's say, protective of her daughter." The librarian's tone when she said protective made James realize there was much more to discover. He spent the next few hours immersed in old newspapers, social directories, and public records, putting together a puzzle that revealed the true power and influence of the Williams family in Charleston. Patricia wasn't just a wealthy woman. She was practically a political force in the city, with connections extending from the mayor to the postmaster. James discovered she had funded political campaigns, sponsored entered social events, and most importantly, had friends in key positions who could easily intercept mail or block communications. The more he investigated, the clearer it became that Patricia Williams had not only the motivation, but also the means to sabotage any communication attempts between him and Sophia. The most shocking discovery came when James found a newspaper article from 5 years ago about a charity gala organized by Patricia. In the photo accompanying the story, he recognized several people: the city's postmaster, the local phone company manager, even the owner of Charleston's oldest internet provider. They were all close friends of Patricia, all moved in the same social circles, all owed her favors. James felt his stomach turn as he realized the extent of the influence network Patricia had built over the years. If she really wanted to prevent him and Sophia from communicating, it would have been incredibly easy. A favor here, a word there, and voila, all contact attempts would be blocked without a trace. It was subtle but devastatingly effective manipulation. And the worst part, Sophia probably never knew she was being manipulated. The anger James felt growing inside him was different from anything he had ever experienced. It wasn't explosive, destructive rage. It was something colder, more calculated, more determined. He was dealing with an injustice that had cost 7 years of happiness to two people who truly loved each other. Patricia Williams had played God with their lives, unilaterally deciding they shouldn't be together. And the most revolting part was that she probably thought she was doing what was best for her daughter. People like Patricia always think they know what's best for others, especially when what's best coincides with their own prejudices and social ambitions. James continued his investigation, now focusing specifically on the first months after his departure. He managed to access old phone records, thanks to a retired company employee who remembered him from school days, and discovered something that confirmed his worst suspicions. All the calls he had made to Sophia's number had been redirected to a non-existent number. Technically, the calls were completed, but never reached their destination. It was a simple but effective trick. James thought he was calling Sophia, but was actually talking to empty air. As for emails, James discovered that the Williams family's internet provider had implemented a custom filter that automatically blocked any messages coming from his email addresses. Officially, the emails were delivered, but in practice, they went straight to a folder Sophia would never see. It was a sophisticated operation, orchestrated with military precision, and Patricia Williams was the conductor of this manipulation symphony. But the most devastating discovery was yet to come. James decided to investigate the other side of the equation too. Had Patricia intercepted Sophia's attempts to communicate with him? The answer came through an unexpected source: Margaret Thompson, a former postal worker who now worked at a flower shop near the library. James recognized her when he passed by the store and decided to strike up a conversation. Margaret remembered him perfectly, and after a few minutes of nostalgic chat, revealed something that made James's blood run cold. "You know," she said, lowering her voice as if telling a secret, "I always thought it was strange how Mrs. Patricia would come personally to pick up those letters at the post office. She said they were for her daughter, but that she preferred to pick them up by hand to prevent them from getting lost. They were always from overseas, you know, and she seemed very anxious to get them before anyone else could see them." James felt the world spin around him. Letters from overseas that Patricia picked up personally? It could only be correspondence from Sophia to him, sent to the family address since she didn't know where he was living. Patricia had intercepted not only his attempts to communicate with Sophia, but also her attempts to communicate with him. It was a total blockade operation, an impenetrable barrier built between two people who loved each other. James thanked Margaret and left the flower shop with shaky legs and a racing heart. Now he was certain Patricia Williams had deliberately destroyed their relationship, condemning both him and Sophia to years of unnecessary suffering. The question hammering in his head now was what to do with this information, how to confront such elaborate and cruel manipulation, and more importantly, was there still time to fix the damage that had been done? The rest of the day passed in a blur of conflicting emotions. James walked through Charleston streets like a ghost, processing the magnitude of the betrayal he had discovered. He thought about Sophia, writing in that blog about letters that never arrived, about a love that seemed to have been abandoned, not knowing she was actually being the victim of cruel and systematic manipulation. He thought about himself, interpreting her silence as rejection, when in reality she was probably going through the same suffering. 7 years of their lives had been stolen by a woman who thought she had the right to decide other people's destiny. The injustice was so glaring that James could barely breathe properly. But along with the anger, an iron determination also grew. He couldn't change the past, but he could do something about the present. He could confront Patricia Williams and demand explanations. He could tell Sophia the truth and let her decide what to do with that information. He could fight for the love that had been sabotaged, even if it was too late to recover the lost years. James knew he was about to enter an emotional war, but he also knew that some battles need to be fought, regardless of the outcome. The truth deserved to be revealed, justice Justice deserved to be done, and true love deserved a second chance. As he walked back to the hotel, James felt he was carrying not only his own emotions, but also the weight of a greater responsibility, making Patricia Williams account for the damage she had caused. Some people think they can play with others' feelings without consequences. Patricia Williams was about to discover she was very wrong. Night fell over Charleston, but James couldn't rest. He was planning his next move, thinking about the best way to approach the situation. Confront Patricia directly, talk to Sophia first, gather more evidence. Each option had its advantages and disadvantages, and James knew he needed to choose carefully. A wrong decision could ruin any chance of reconciliation with Sophia or, worse yet, cause her more pain. After all, discovering that her own mother had sabotaged the great love of her life wouldn't be easy to process. James remembered how close Sophia was to her family, especially her mother, despite their differences of opinion. Revealing the truth could destroy that relationship forever, but hiding the truth wasn't an option either. Sophia deserved to know what had really happened, deserved to have the chance to make her own decisions based on facts, not lies and manipulations. While pondering his options, James returned to Sophia's blog, rereading some posts with a completely new perspective. Now he could see between the lines, understand the real pain behind the carefully chosen words. Sophia had been as much a victim as he was, maybe even more, because she had lived all these years thinking she had been abandoned by the man she loved. The injustice was so deep that James felt tears of rage streaming down his face, but along with the anger, there was also renewed hope. If Sophia had really waited for him all these years, if she had really kept alive the love she felt, then maybe there was still a chance for them. Maybe the truth, however painful, could finally free them from the chains of the past and open the way for a future together. James fell asleep that night with a clear resolution in his mind. He would confront Patricia Williams and discover exactly how far she had gone to destroy their relationship. And then, armed with the complete truth, he would seek out Sophia and tell her everything. What happened after that would depend on her, but at least both would have the chance to make decisions based on reality, not the lies that had governed their lives for so long. Have you ever been in one of those situations where fate seems to have a very peculiar sense of humor? James was about to experience exactly that. After a restless night, full of plans and strategies to confront Patricia Williams, he decided he needed strong coffee and a moment to organize his thoughts before going into battle. Ironically, he chose to go to the same café where he had discovered the reserved table, perhaps seeking some kind of spiritual strength in the place that had started this whole journey of discoveries. What he didn't expect was that the universe had other plans for that morning. James was sitting at their table, absent-mindedly stirring his coffee and mentally reviewing everything he had discovered about Patricia's manipulation, when he heard a familiar laugh that made his heart stop. It was a melodious, sweet laugh that he would recognize anywhere in the world, even after 7 years. Slowly, as if afraid of breaking a spell, James looked up and saw her. Sophia Williams was there, just a few yards away, chatting animatedly with a friend near the cafe entrance. She was even more beautiful than he remembered. Time had only refined her natural beauty, adding an elegant maturity that made her even more stunning. For a moment, James was completely paralyzed, like a teenager seeing his crush for the first time. 7 years of longing, dreams, hopes, and disappointments condensed into that unique instant. And then, as if feeling the weight of his gaze, Sophia turned her head toward the table. Their eyes met, and the world seemed to stop spinning. What happened in the following seconds was a mixture of magic and terror that James would never forget. Sophia stood motionless for a moment, as if seeing a ghost, and then her face went through a rapid sequence of emotions: surprise, disbelief, joy, pain, hope. It was like watching a fast-forward movie, where each frame revealed a different layer of repressed feelings. Sophia's friend said something, but she didn't respond, couldn't look away from James. It was as if they were alone in the cafe, connected by an invisible thread that had resisted 7 years of separation. James stood up slowly, not quite knowing what to do with his own hands, his own body, his own heart that beat so hard he was sure she could hear it. Sophia murmured something to her friend and began walking toward him, each step loaded with a hesitation that mixed fear and desire. When they finally stood face to face, separated only by the small wrought iron table, James noticed she was trembling slightly. "James," she said, and her voice was exactly as he remembered: soft, musical, capable of calming storms or creating hurricanes depending on the context. "Sophia," he replied, and that was all he could say before words got lost somewhere between his heart and throat. They stood there looking at each other, trying to process process the reality of that moment they had both dreamed of and feared for years. It was real. She was there, he was there, and nothing else mattered in that instant except the fact that true love had found a way to reunite two souls that should never have been separated. "You came back," Sophia said, and there was a mixture of statement and question in those two simple words. James nodded, still trying to find his voice. "I came back," he confirmed. I read your blog." The words came out before he could think if it was appropriate to mention that right away, but Sophia didn't seem surprised. In fact, a small smile touched the corners of her mouth. "You read it?" she asked, and James noticed there was hope in her voice, as if the blog had been written precisely for him to find. "I read every word," James admitted. "Every painting, every poem, every declaration of love disguised as art." Sophia blushed slightly but didn't look away. "I always hoped you would find it," she confessed. "It was my way of keeping you close, even when you were so far away." The raw honesty of that confession hit James like a punch to the stomach. Here was confirmation of everything he had discovered, but coming directly from her lips. Sophia had really waited, had really kept alive the love she felt, had really followed his life from afar, cheering for his success even while suffering from his absence. "Sophia, I need to tell you some things," James began, thinking about everything he had discovered about Patricia's manipulation. "Things about why I could never contact you, about why—" But Sophia raised her hand, gently interrupting him. "I know," she said, and there was deep sadness in her eyes. "I found out a few months ago, about my mother, about the letters, about everything." James felt as if the ground had disappeared from under his feet. She knew. How? And if she knew, why hadn't she tried to contact him? The revelation that Sophia already knew about her mother's manipulation completely changed the conversation's dynamic. James sat heavily in the chair, trying to process this new information. "How did you find out?" he asked, his voice carrying a mixture of relief and confusion. Sophia sat down too, her hands trembling slightly as she rested them on the table. "It was by accident," she explained. "A few months ago I was helping my mother clean the attic. I found a hidden box behind some old things. Inside there were all the letters you sent me, James. All the letters I never received." The pain in her voice was palpable, and James felt his heart break imagining the moment she had discovered the extent of the betrayal. "There were dozens of them," Sophia continued, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Beautiful letters full of love and longing, explaining your projects, your dreams, your plans to come back to me. And I never knew they existed." James reached across the table, gently touching her fingers. "Sophia, I tried so hard to contact you. I thought you had decided to move on, that you didn't want to hear from me anymore." She shook her head vigorously. "Never," she said firmly. "I would never have done that. I loved you too much, James. I still do." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with an emotional weight that 7 years of separation hadn't been able to diminish. James felt tears streaming down his face, but he didn't care. Finally, after so long, they were having the conversation they should have had years ago. Finally, the truth was being revealed, and with it, the possibility of a future both had thought was lost forever. But then Sophia did something that caught James completely off guard. She withdrew her hand from his and lowered her eyes as if preparing to reveal something painful. "James," she said, her voice almost a whisper, "there's something else you need to know." She took a deep breath, as if gathering courage to continue. I'm engaged." The words hit James like lightning from a clear blue sky. For a moment, he couldn't process what he had heard. Engaged? How could she be engaged if she still loved him? If she had discovered the manipulation? If she had waited for him all these years? How could she be engaged to another man? "His name is William Carter," Sophia continued, each word coming out with difficulty. "He's a doctor here in town. We're getting married next month." James felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. The world around him began to spin, and he had to hold onto the table to keep from falling off the chair. But you said you still love me," he managed to articulate, his voice coming out hoarse and broken. Sophia looked up, and James saw in her eyes pain as deep as his own. "And I do," she confirmed. "I'll always love you, James, but I can't keep living and waiting. William is a good man, he loves me, and I need to move forward." The irony of the situation was too cruel to be real. James had returned just when Sophia had decided to stop waiting. He had discovered the truth about the manipulation just when she had chosen to build a new life. The timing couldn't be worse, as if fate were playing a cruel joke on them. "Sophia," James said, his voice loaded with desperation, "you can't marry him knowing you still love me. That's not fair to you, or to him, or to me." The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult James had ever faced in his life. Sophia explained how she had met William 2 years ago, when he helped her during an anxiety attack she had at an art exhibition. He had been patient, caring, understanding of her emotional issues, and her difficulty in opening up completely to someone. "He knows about you," Sophia admitted. "He knows I had a great love in the past, knows that part of my heart will always belong to that person, and even so, he chose to stay with me." James felt a mixture of anger and respect for this William Carter. Anger because he was stealing the woman James loved, loved, but respect because he was apparently a decent man who had taken care of Sophia when she needed it most. But that's not true love, Sophia, James argued. If you're marrying him out of gratitude for security, out of fear of being alone, that's not fair to either of you. Sophia shook her head, tears now flowing freely down her face. It's not just that, James. William gave me stability when I needed it most. He helped me rebuild my life after accepting that you wouldn't come back. I can't just abandon him now because you decided to return. Her logic made sense, but James's heart refused to accept it. Had he lost 7 years because of Patricia Williams' manipulation? And now was he going to lose Sophia forever because of fate's cruel timing? What if I told you there are still things you don't know? James asked, thinking about all the evidence he had collected about the extent of Patricia's sabotage. What if I told you that your mother didn't just intercept our letters but also manipulated our communication in every possible way? That she used her influence in the city to ensure we could never talk? Sophia sighed deeply. I suspected there was more, she admitted. But James, that doesn't change the fact that I made a promise to William, that I built a life with him, that he doesn't deserve to be abandoned like this. James realized he was dealing with something much more complex than a simple matter of love. He was dealing with questions of honor, loyalty, moral responsibility, and for the first time since returning to Charleston, he began to question whether he was doing the right thing by fighting for Sophia. The silence that followed was charged with almost palpable tension. James and Sophia looked at each other across the table, each lost in their own thoughts, trying to navigate an emotional labyrinth that had no easy exits. James could see the internal struggle reflected in her eyes, the love she still felt for him battling against the sense of responsibility she felt toward William. It was an impossible situation where any choice would result in pain for someone. Sophia, James said finally, his voice calmer now, I didn't come here to destroy your life. I came because I needed to understand what had happened to us. I needed to know if what we had was real, or if I had imagined it all during these years of longing. Sophia reached out again, touching his hand. It was real, she said firmly. It was the most real thing I've ever experienced in my life, and that's why this is so difficult. James nodded, understanding the complexity of the situation. Then answer me one thing, he asked. If you could go back in time, if you could change things, would you choose to stay with me? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with all the unlived possibilities, all the unrealized dreams, all the love that had been forced to hibernate for 7 long years. Sophia closed her eyes for a moment, as if she were actually traveling back in time, revisiting all the choices she had made and all the ones she hadn't had the chance to make. When she opened her eyes again, James saw in them a determination that hadn't been there before. Yes, she said, her voice firm despite the tears. 1,000 times, yes. And in that moment, James knew that the fight for Sophia's heart was just beginning. He had discovered that she still loved him, but now he needed to find out if that love would be strong enough to overcome the complications of the present. Because sometimes, my friend, true love isn't just about feelings, it's also about timing, circumstances, and the courage to fight for what really matters, even when the odds seem impossible. Have you ever played dominoes? You know how one small piece can knock down an entire row when pushed at just the right angle? James's decision to tell Sophia the whole truth was exactly like pushing that first domino. What happened next was a chain reaction that no one, absolutely no one, could have predicted. After that emotionally devastating encounter at the cafe, James spent 2 full days weighing his options. He could accept Sophia's decision and leave again, taking with him the certainty that she still loved him, but respecting her choice to honor her commitment to William. Or he could fight, reveal the full extent of Patricia Williams's manipulation, and let Sophia make a decision based on complete facts, not half-truths. The second option was risky. It could destroy her relationship with her mother, cause a scandal in town, and still not guarantee she would choose to stay with him. But James had learned a painful lesson in recent days. Secrets and lies only cause suffering. If he truly loved Sophia, he needed to give her all the information necessary to make the best decision for her own life. He couldn't be like Patricia, unilaterally deciding what was best for another person. True love, James realized, sometimes means giving the person you love the freedom to choose, even when that choice might hurt us. So he did what his heart told him. He arranged to meet with Sophia and told her absolutely everything. Every detail of the investigation, every piece of evidence of sabotage, every piece of the puzzle he had assembled about the systematic manipulation that had separated them. And that's when the first domino fell. Sophia's reaction was even more intense than James had imagined. She wasn't just devastated by the extent of her mother's betrayal, but also furious with herself for not investigating more deeply when she found the letters in the attic. "How could I have been so naive?" she repeated, pacing back and forth in the small apartment where they had met. "How didn't I realize there was so much more behind all this?" James tried to console her, explaining that Patricia had been extremely careful and sophisticated in her manipulation, but Sophia was inconsolable. The discovery had shaken not only her perception of the past, but also her own judgment. "If my own mother was capable of deceiving me for so long," she said, "how can I trust any decision I make?" It was a deep existential crisis, and James realized he had underestimated the emotional impact the truth would have on her. But it was when Sophia made an unexpected decision that things really started getting interesting. "I'm going to tell William everything," she announced with a determination that surprised James. "He deserves to know the complete truth before marrying me. He deserves to understand that I discovered the great love of my life didn't abandon me, that he came back and that I still love him." James tried to argue that maybe it would be better to think a little more before making such a drastic decision, but Sophia was unwavering. "No," she said firmly. "There have been too many lies in this story already. William will know everything, and then he can decide if he still wants to marry me knowing my heart is divided." It was a brave and honest move, but also extremely risky. James didn't know whether to admire her integrity or worry about the consequences this brutal honesty could bring. What happened when Sophia told William Carter everything was the second big surprise in this story full of twists. James was expecting an explosive reaction, maybe anger, jealousy, an epic fight that would end with the engagement canceled amid screaming and accusations. Instead, William reacted in a way that left everyone speechless. He listened to the whole story in silence, asked a few specific questions about particular details, and then said something no one expected. "Sophia, I always knew you didn't love me the same way I love you. And you know what? That's okay." The raw honesty of that statement caught Sophia completely off guard. William continued, his voice calm but loaded with deep sadness. "I fell in love with you knowing your heart belonged to someone else. I thought that with time and patience, you would learn to love me the same way. But now I realize I was being selfish. You deserve to be with someone who awakens in you the same kind of love you feel for this James." Sophia began to cry, not from relief, but from deep guilt. "William, you're a wonderful man," she said. "You helped me when I needed it most, gave me stability, made me feel safe." But William gently interrupted her. "And you gave me 2 of the happiest years of my life," he replied. "But happiness built on a false foundation isn't sustainable long term. I'd rather have 2 years of real happiness with you than a lifetime of a marriage where you're physically present but emotionally absent." William's emotional maturity was impressive, and James, who had prepared to hate the man who had stolen his Sophia, found himself deeply respecting the way he was handling the situation. It wasn't every day you saw someone give up their own wedding out of true love for the person they were letting go. But if James thought the surprises were over, he was very wrong. William did something no one saw coming. He asked to meet James personally. "If Sophia is going to be with you," he said, "I want to make sure you're the kind of man who deserves her love." The meeting between the two men who loved the same woman took place at a quiet bar in downtown Charleston, away from curious eyes and small-town gossip. James arrived prepared for a tense conversation, maybe even hostile, but William surprised him again with his direct and honest approach. "Look," William said after ordering 2 beers, "I'm not going to pretend I'm not suffering through all this. Losing Sophia is like losing a part of myself, but I'm also not the type of person who fights for someone who doesn't want to be with me." James didn't know what to say. He had prepared to defend his love for Sophia, to justify his return, maybe even fight for the right to be with her. Instead, he found a man who was voluntarily stepping aside because he genuinely wanted her happiness above his own. "Why are you doing this?" James asked, genuinely curious. William smiled sadly. "Because true love sometimes means letting go," he replied. "And because I saw the way her eyes lit up when she talked about you. I've never seen that sparkle when she looks at me." It was a painful, but also liberating confession. William was choosing dignity over desperation, generosity over selfishness. James realized he was facing a truly noble man, someone who deserved respect and admiration, even though he was technically his rival. "I just have one request," William continued. "Take good care of her. Sophia has suffered enough because of manipulations and lies. If you're going to be with her, always be honest, always present, always worthy of the love she feels for you." James extended his hand, and the two men shook with mutual respect that transcended the complicated situation they found themselves in. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, another conversation was happening, and this one was truly explosive. Sophia had decided it was time to confront Patricia Williams about all the manipulation she had discovered. The conversation between mother and daughter was everything James had imagined, and worse. Patricia initially tried to deny everything, then minimize her actions, and finally justify everything as protection for her daughter. "I did what what any mother would do," Patricia shouted, her aristocratic composure finally cracking. "That boy wasn't suitable for you. He would have dragged you into a life of mediocrity." Sophia, in turn, was furious in a way she had never been before. "You had no right to make that decision for me," she shouted back. "You stole 7 years of my life, 7 years of happiness I could have had." The fight escalated quickly, with Patricia revealing even more details about the extent of her manipulation, how she had spread rumors about James in town, how she had used her influence to ensure he couldn't get work in Charleston if he returned, how she had even hired a private investigator to monitor his activities abroad. Each revelation was like a stab to Sophia's heart, as she realized her mother had built a network of lies and manipulations far more elaborate than she had ever imagined. "You destroyed my life," Sophia said, her voice broken with emotion, "and you destroyed his life too. Why? Because of your pride, your obsession with social status?" Patricia, cornered and desperate, did what narcissistic people do when confronted with their actions. She attacked. "I did this out of love," she screamed. "Everything I've ever done was out of love for you." But Sophia shook her head. "That wasn't love, Mom. It was control. It was selfishness. It was you deciding you knew better than me what was good for my own life." And then, with a calm that surprised even herself, Sophia said the words that would forever change the family dynamic. "I don't want you in my life anymore. At least not until you acknowledge what you did and truly apologize. Not just to me, but to James too." It was a complete break, the kind of confrontation that leaves permanent scars on families. But sometimes, for healing to happen, you first need to cut away the infected part. News of Sophia and William's canceled wedding spread through Charleston like wildfire. In a small town where everyone knows everyone, this kind of scandal becomes conversation material on every corner, every café, every social gathering. The reactions were as varied as possible. Some of Sophia's friends supported her unconditionally, understanding that she had been the victim of cruel manipulation and deserved a second chance with her true love. Others, especially those closer to the Williams family, were scandalized by what they saw as a betrayal of William, who was widely respected in the local medical community. There were also those who had known Patricia for years and couldn't believe she was capable of such elaborate manipulation. After all, she had always been seen as a pillar of local society, a woman of principles and traditional values. James found himself at the center of a storm of gossip and speculation. Some saw him as the romantic hero who had returned to rescue his great love, others as the villain who had destroyed a happy engagement. The truth, as always, was somewhere in the middle, but the truth is rarely as interesting as the dramatized versions people prefer to believe. What impressed James most was how William was handling the entire situation. Instead of feeding the drama or trying to get revenge, he maintained impressive dignity, refusing to speak ill of Sophia or James when questioned about the wedding cancellation. "Sometimes things just don't work out as planned," was all he would say when pressed for details. His class and maturity only made more people respect him, which ironically made the situation even more complicated for Sophia, who felt guilty for having hurt such a good man. It was as if every action generated an unexpected reaction, creating a web of consequences that no one had foreseen when it all began. You know those moments in life where you need to make a decision that will change everything forever? Sophia Williams was living exactly that. After weeks of emotional turbulence, family confrontations, and the cancellation of her wedding, she finally reached the point where she needed to choose between the security of the familiar and the uncertainty of true love. The social pressure in Charleston was intense. A small southern town doesn't easily forgive those who break social conventions, especially when it involves traditional families like the Williams. But Sophia had learned a valuable lesson during this entire ordeal. Other people's opinions cannot be more important than one's own happiness. She had spent 7 years living a life that wasn't completely her own, making decisions based on others' expectations instead of following her own heart's desires. She wasn't going to make the same mistake again. The final conversation with William had been liberating in a way she hadn't expected. He had not only released her from the commitment with grace and dignity, but had also given her something even more valuable: his blessing. "Sophia," he had said in their last conversation, "I want you to be happy, truly happy. And if that happiness is with James, then that's what I wish for you." These were words she would carry in her heart forever, not just for the generosity they showed, but also for the lesson about what it really means to love someone. Sometimes loving means letting go. And William had demonstrated a type of mature and selfless love that few men would be capable of showing. Now, with this unexpected blessing, Sophia finally felt free to follow her heart without carrying the weight of guilt that had threatened to suffocate her. Sophia's decision to give love love with James a second chance wasn't made impulsively. She spent days reflecting on everything that had happened, weighing not only the feelings involved, but also the lessons she had learned about herself during this process. Sophia realized she had spent years building walls around her heart, protecting herself from the possibility of being hurt again. The relationship with William, however genuine it was on his part, had partly been a way for her to stay in an emotional comfort zone. She loved him, yes, but it was a safe, predictable love that didn't challenge her or make her feel the emotional vertigo that true love provokes. With James, it was different. It had always been different. He made her feel alive in a way she had forgotten was possible. He made her heart race, her hands tremble, her dreams expand beyond the limits of what she considered possible. It was scary and exciting at the same time, like walking a tightrope over an abyss. Dangerous, but also the only way to get to the other side. Sophia knew that choosing James meant choosing uncertainty, passion, the possibility of both extraordinary happiness and devastating pain. But she also knew that some opportunities appear only once in a lifetime, and when they knock on your door, you need to have the courage to open it. True love doesn't come with guarantees, but it comes with the promise that, regardless of what happens, you will have lived intensely. And Sophia was finally ready to live intensely again. The moment when Sophia communicated her decision to James was simple and at the same time deeply meaningful. They met at the same pier where it all began, where James had found the fresh flowers that made him realize that maybe Sophia still thought about him. It was a golden late afternoon, with the sun painting Charleston's sky with shades of orange and pink that seemed to have come from a romantic painting. "James," Sophia said, her voice firm despite the emotion that showed in her eyes, "I choose you. I choose us. I choose true love, even with all the risks that implies." James felt as if the entire world had stopped to hear those words. 7 years of longing, doubts, unrealized dreams dissolved in that instant. He pulled her into his arms, and when they kissed, it was as if time had gone backward, as if they were again those young lovers who had promised each other eternal love in that same place. But at the same time, there was something different about this kiss, a maturity, a depth that only comes with suffering and personal growth. They were no longer the same people who had separated 7 years ago. They were wiser, stronger versions, more aware of the value of what they had found in each other. "I love you," James whispered against her lips. "I always have, I always will, and I love you too," Sophia replied, more than words can express. It was a simple declaration, but loaded with all the weight of the years they had spent apart, all the tears shed, all the dreams that had been forced to hibernate. Now finally, those dreams could wake up and become reality. But Sophia and James knew that declarations of love, however sincere, wouldn't be enough to guarantee they wouldn't be separated again. They had learned in the most painful way possible that there are people willing to interfere in others' happiness when that happiness doesn't align with their own interests or prejudices. Therefore, one of the first things they did together was establish clear and firm boundaries with those who had tried to sabotage their relationship. The conversation with Patricia Williams was particularly difficult, but necessary. James insisted on being present when Sophia confronted her mother one last time, not out of distrust, but out of solidarity. They were a team now and would face challenges together. "Mom," Sophia said, her voice calm but determined, "James and I are going to be together. This isn't a negotiation. It's not something that's open for discussion. It's a decision we've made as conscious adults." Patricia tried to argue, appeal, even threaten, but Sophia remained firm. "If you want to be part of my life," she continued, "you'll have to accept James as part of the family. You'll have to genuinely apologize for what you did and promise you'll never interfere in our decisions again." James watched the scene with a mixture of pride and sadness. Pride for the strength and determination Sophia showed, sadness knowing this confrontation was causing her pain, even though it was necessary. Patricia, accustomed to controlling every aspect of her daughter's life, didn't accept the new boundaries well. She left the house slamming the door, shouting that Sophia was making the biggest mistake of her life. But for the first time, her emotional manipulations didn't work. Sophia had finally learned the difference between genuine love and control, disguised as protection. It was painful, but also liberating. Sometimes, for true love to flourish, you need to cut away the weeds that try to suffocate it. The months that followed were a period of rebuilding and rediscovery. James and Sophia didn't try to simply resume their relationship where they had left off 7 years ago. They knew they were different people now, shaped by the experiences they had lived during the separation. Instead, they got to know each other again, discovering the changes time had brought and learning to love the updated versions of each other. James had become more mature, more focused, more aware of the value of personal relationships compared to professional success. Sophia had developed an emotional independence she didn't have before, an inner strength that made her even more attractive in his eyes. They spent hours talking about the years they had lost, sharing stories, dreams, fears, and hopes. It was like putting together an emotional puzzle, fitting the pieces of their separate lives to form a complete picture of who they were now, James decided to establish his architecture firm in Charleston, combining his international experience with local projects that respected the city's history and culture. Sophia returned to painting with renewed passion, creating works that celebrated not only rediscovered love, but also the journey of personal growth she had experienced. They bought a small but charming house in the historic district, a place where they could build new memories without being haunted by old ones. It was a true fresh start, based not on nostalgia for what they had lost, but on hope for what they could build together. And for the first time in 7 years, both felt complete. Love had won, but not in the romantic and simplified way of movies. It had won through struggle, determination, courage to face the truth, and wisdom to learn from past mistakes. James and Sophia's wedding ceremony was deliberately simple and intimate. After everything they had been through, they wanted the focus to be on the meaning of the commitment they were making, not on the pomp and circumstance that traditionally accompanies weddings in families like the Williams. The ceremony took place on the same pier where they had reunited, with only a few close friends as witnesses. William Carter was there, in a final demonstration of his class and generosity. He had become an unexpected friend of the couple, proving that sometimes the most complicated situations can result in the most genuine connections. Patricia Williams was not present. She had chosen to maintain her position of disapproval instead of accepting her daughter's happiness. It was a sad loss, but Sophia had learned she couldn't force anyone to mature emotionally. Some people prefer to cling to pride and control instead of embracing love and forgiveness. During the ceremony, James and Sophia exchanged vows they had written personally, promising not only to love each other, but also to protect their relationship from external interference that had almost destroyed them. "I promise to always be honest with you," James said, "and never let anything or anyone come between us again. I promise to trust in our love," Sophia replied, "and never again let fear prevent me from fighting for our happiness." These were promises forged in the fire of experience, tempered by pain and wisdom that only comes with overcome suffering. When they kissed as husband and wife, everyone present knew they were witnessing not just a wedding, but the victory of true love over all the forces that had tried to destroy it. It was a happy ending that was earned, not given, and for that reason, it was even more precious. The epilogue of this story happened 2 years later, when James and Sophia were sitting on their house's porch, watching the sunset over Charleston, while their little daughter, Emily, played in the garden. The family Sophia had always dreamed of having had finally become reality, but in an even sweeter way because it had been achieved through so much struggle and determination. James looked at his wife, who was radiant with happiness, and realized that sometimes fate has a peculiar sense of humor. He had left Charleston believing he was building a better future for both of them, but in reality, he had been forced to take a journey that would prepare him to be the man Sophia deserved. She in turn had gone through her own journey of growth and self-discovery, learning to value her own happiness above others' expectations. They had lost each other to find each other again, stronger and wiser. "Do you regret anything?" Sophia asked, as if reading his thoughts. James thought for a moment before answering. "I regret the pain we went through," he said, "but I don't regret the journey. It brought us here." Sophia smiled and nestled closer to him. "I don't regret it either," she said, "because now I know, with absolute certainty, that our love is strong enough to overcome anything." And as they watched their daughter play in the garden of the house they had built together, James and Sophia knew they had proven something important. True love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice that needs to be made every day, a choice that sometimes requires courage, sacrifice, and the willingness to fight against all odds. But when made with sincerity and determination, that choice can create miracles. It can reunite soulmates separated by time and distance. It can heal wounds that seemed incurable. It can transform pain into joy, longing into gratitude, forgiveness into strength, and it can prove that in the end, love always wins, not because it's easy, but because it's worth fighting for. The story of James and Sophia teaches us something fundamental about the nature of true love and the destructive power of lies. For 7 years, two people who loved each other deeply lived believing a false version of reality, suffering unnecessarily because of manipulation by someone who should have looked after their happiness. Patricia Williams believed she was protecting her daughter, but in reality she was robbing her of the right to choose her own destiny. This story shows us how control disguised as love can be more destructive than any declared enemy, and how the people we trust most are sometimes capable of the deepest betrayals. But if there's a powerful lesson in this narrative, it's that truth always finds a way to emerge. No matter how elaborate the manipulation, no matter how long lies manage to sustain themselves, there comes a moment when reality imposes itself. James could have accepted the official version of events and continued his life carrying the pain of abandonment. Sophia could have married William without ever discovering she had been the victim of systematic sabotage. But fate, or perhaps the force of true love, conspired for the truth to come to light at the exact exact moment when it was still possible to do something about it. This teaches us that it's never too late to question narratives that don't make sense, to investigate inconsistencies that trouble our hearts. What's most impressive about this story is how each character dealt with the revelations. William Carter could have become a villain, fighting desperately to keep Sophia by his side. Instead, he demonstrated rare emotional maturity, understanding that true love sometimes means letting go. Sophia could have chosen the security of the familiar instead of risking everything for love from the past, but she had the courage to follow her heart, even knowing it would cause pain to people she loved. And James? He could have simply accepted that he had arrived too late and left again. Instead, he fought for truth and love, with a determination that transformed an apparently impossible situation into a victory of the heart over manipulation. The reconciliation of James and Sophia wasn't just the reunion of two lovers. It was the victory of authenticity over falsehood, courage over fear, truth over lies. They proved that true love isn't just a passing feeling, but a force capable of resisting time, distance, and even deliberate attempts at destruction. More importantly, they showed that it's possible to rebuild trust and happiness even after years of suffering, as long as there's honesty, determination, and willingness to face painful truths. Their marriage wasn't just a romantic ceremony. It was a declaration that some things in life are worth fighting for, no matter how difficult the battle. This story reminds us that we all have the right to choose our own path, to love whom we want to love, to build the life we want to live. No one, not even those who love us, has the right to make those decisions for us. And when someone tries to manipulate our reality to serve their own interests or prejudices, we have not only the right, but the responsibility to confront that manipulation and fight for our truth. True love doesn't need lies to survive. In fact, it can only flourish completely in an environment of total honesty. If this story touched your heart, if it made you remember someone who also needs the courage to fight for their own happiness, share this message. Sometimes the right story arrives at the exact moment when someone needs to hear that it's never too late to start over, that truth is always worth it, and that true love can overcome any obstacle. Hit like if you believe genuine love deserves to be celebrated, subscribe to the channel for more stories that touch the heart, and share in the comments. Would you have the courage to fight for your true love, even against all adversities?